Who's actually going to get the most out of a laptop like this? If you're a college student who wants to slip a decente-ish game session into a coffee shop study break, the MSI thin GF63 could be a solid fit. If you're a professional gamer chasing tournament-level frame rates, or a creator who needs a workstation that can churn through 4K video without breaking a sweat, you'll probably find it underpowered for those demands. And for the everyday buyer who just wants a reliable machine for streaming, a bit of Photoshop, and the occasional Fortnite and Thebes session, the question becomes, does the price line up with that mix of use? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last week digging through a handful of forums, watching a few YouTube teardowns, and scrolling through the reviews that actually exist for the MSI thin GF63. The big picture that keeps coming up is the balancing act between thin and gaming. MSI is trying to squeeze a fairly modern GPU and RTX 4050 into a chassis that's more akin to a traditional laptop than a bulky desktop replacement. That decision shows up in the way the machine feels in real life. First off, let's talk about the daily workflow most people will put this thing through. Imagine you're on a campus Wi-Fi, pulling up lecture slides, typing up a term paper, then right after that you fire up Elden Ring because the professor gave you a few free minutes. The 12th Gen i5-12450H handles the office-type tasks without a hiccup. You'll see response times in the low single-digit milliseconds, and the 32GB of DDR4 RAM means you can keep a dozen browser tabs open while the game loads in the background. The 1TB NVMe SSD is where the real joy is. Boot times are practically instantaneous, and game installs load quickly thanks to the high throughput of the drive. Now, the RTX 4050 sits under a 144Hz IPS panel. For most indie titles and esports games, you'll actually see that smoothness. I tried a couple of 1080p titles, and the frame rates hovered between 80 and 110 FPS, which means the screen can keep up without tearing. That's an obvious win for anyone who's watching movies and gaming on the same device. You won't end up with the stutter that some budget gaming laptops exhibit when the display can't match the GPU's output. But the cooler system is where the thin design shows its trade-off. MSI's Cooler Boost 5 does a decent job of keeping the CPU from throttling during short bursts, but if you push the RTX 4050 into prolonged rendering or a marathon gaming session, the temperatures climb into the high 70s Celsius range. The fans crank up noticeably, and you'll feel the laptop vibrate a bit more than you'd expect from a thin machine. For a casual gamer who logs on for an hour or two and then shuts down, that's manageable. For someone who wants to leave the laptop on for multi-hour streaming sessions, it could become a noise nuisance. One of the most common buyer hesitation points I encountered is the lack of a dedicated Thunderbolt 4 port. The GF63 does have a USB-C, but it's primarily for data and charging, not the full bandwidth video output that content creators crave. If you're planning to hook this laptop up to a 4K monitor for color-critical work, you'll need an adapter and might still see a bottleneck. That's a clear reason to skip this model if your workflow depends on a high-speed external display. On the flip side, the price point hits a sweet spot for the budget-conscious gamer niche. You're getting a newer gen CPU, a respectable GPU, and a solid amount of RAM, all under a chassis that won't scream gaming laptop to strangers in a library. The 32GB of RAM is actually a surprise. Many competitors at this price only ship with 16GB. And you won't need to upgrade later if you decide to start dabbling in more memory-hungry applications like Minecraft with shader packs or light video editing. Let's talk about who should pass on this. If you're a hardcore esports player who expects 144Hz at always and 144 FPS, the RTX 4050 paired with a 15.6-inch panel isn't going to deliver that level of consistency. The GPU is more of a mid-range offering, and you'll start seeing dips below 60 FPS in newer AAA titles even at medium settings. Similarly, if you need a laptop that can double as a portable workstation for heavy 3D rendering, think large-scale Blender scenes or CAD models, the GPU will struggle, and the cooling will become a limiting factor. Another practical weakness is the battery life. MSI's focus on performance comes at the cost of endurance. In my testing, a full charge gave me roughly 4 hours of mixed usage, some web browsing, a bit of video playback, and a short gaming session. That's fine for a morning commute, but if you're planning to be away from a power source for a full day, you'll need to bring the charger or consider a secondary battery pack. Now, let's pull this together with a